Hello and welcome back to Steady as She Goes, the Maritime podcast, bringing you stories, history and news from around our coasts. As always, thank you for your continued support. It really does mean a lot, and if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like, share and tell your friends. It's the best way to help us grow and keep these stories alive. Now, on this episode, we've got a real mix of maritime history, modern developments and stories from around the coast. We'll be paying tribute to our great friend Fred Crampton, a man who meant so much to our maritime community. We'll be marking the anniversary of the loss of the RMS Titanic, reflecting not only on the tragedy, but on the lasting legacy it left on maritime safety. We'll be looking at arrivals and developments, including the impressive National Geographic Endurance in Belfast Lough, and the latest from the tanker fleet with the arrival of the Thun Renew. We'll also be highlighting opportunities to get involved at sea with Sail Training Ireland and the fantastic work of Mehel Mara. And as always, we'll have our maritime words of the week, a few stories from around the coast and maybe even a myth or two to unravel along the way. Welcome back aboard. This is episode 17 of Steady as She Goes. In the past couple of weeks, we've been met with yet more sadness here at the Roster Harbour Maritime Heritage Centre with the passing of our dear friend, shipmate and supporter, Fred Crampton. Fred had been a huge supporter of the centre since its very inception and a great friend to us all. He was a man of immense talent and remarkable patience, and he always had time to share his knowledge or engage in conversation, whether it was about a warship, a helicopter, or perhaps his favourite models of all, the RNLI lifeboats. We said goodbye to Fred recently following what to us was a sudden passing after a very short illness. His loss has been deeply felt and he will be forever remembered in our hearts and minds. Now, Fred was a natural organiser, someone who simply got things done. No matter what was happening, Fred would be on the phone making sure everything was lined up and ready to go. His attention to detail in organisation was every bit as meticulous as his model building. At his funeral service, we learned even more about Fred's incredible life, his talent in engineering, his ingenuity, and the quiet but meaningful impact he had on so many projects. We also heard of his involvement with the sail training vessel Lord Nelson, a ship designed for people of all abilities, something that was clearly very close to Fred's heart, both personally and professionally. There was a large and fitting turnout at his funeral service in Monageer, a testament to the respect and admiration in which he was held. His coffin was carried by his close friends and fellow members of the Tusker Marine Modellers, and in a beautiful and fitting tribute, 2 model lifeboats built by Fred himself were placed on the altar throughout the service. Fred will be greatly missed not just within our own maritime community here in Roster Harbour, but across Ireland and the UK. And we of course extend our sincere sympathies to his wife Susan, his daughter Sarah, his brothers Colin and Victor, and to all of Fred's family and many, many friends. Fair winds, calm seas, and steady as she goes, Fred. Now we're going to start off our news from around the coast this week with some RNLI news, and it's particularly fitting that we do so. As we mentioned earlier, our late friend Fred Crampton was a tireless supporter and fundraiser for the RNLI. No matter where you met Fred, he'd have a bucket in his hand or a model lifeboat or a replica lifeboat with a little slot in it, and always encouraging people to spare a few coins in support of lifeboat crews. It was something he was deeply passionate about, and it's a cause that continues to make a real difference around our shores. And that brings us to the latest figures just released by the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. So in 2025, RNLI lifeboats across the island of Ireland launched a total of 967 times from its 46 stations. Over the course of those call-outs, volunteer crews brought 912 people to safety, with 17 lives saved. And notably, a significant number of those launches took place during the hours of darkness. These figures really underline the vital role the RNLI continues to play, with crews ready to respond at a moment's notice in all conditions, day or night. It also serves as a timely reminder as we head into the warmer months that while the sea can be inviting, it demands respect. And as always, the RNLI's life-saving work relies on the dedication of its volunteers and the ongoing support of the public, something our friend Fred understood better than most. So 967 launches in a single year, a remarkable figure and a powerful testament to the work of RNLI crews right around our coast. Now we turn to shipping movements around our coast. And as we mentioned in the previous episode, ton tankers are a very familiar sight, delivering much needed fuel and fuel products to the island of Ireland. The company is currently undergoing a fleet renewal program, and the appropriately named Ton Renew is the first of these new vessels that we're likely to see on our shores. At the moment, she's en route from the Netherlands and is expected to arrive in Milford Haven either Friday or Saturday of this week, where she'll take on her very first cargo. Now, her first discharge port hasn't been confirmed as yet, but it's expected that she'll be calling to one of the Irish ports very, very soon indeed. And the Ton Renew is a modern IMO2 chemical and product tanker operated by the Swedish-based Erik Ton Group under their Ton Tankers fleet. Now, these vessels are specifically designed for short sea shipping, that kind of workhorse ship that keeps fuel moving steadily between major hubs like Milford Haven and regional ports across Ireland and the UK. In terms of size, she comes in at around 18,000 tonnes deadweight, measuring just under 150 metres in length, which makes her smaller than the larger ocean-going tankers, but perfectly suited to accessing a wide range of ports around our coastline. She has a cargo capacity of roughly 18,000 cubic metres, and that's in the region of 18 million litres of fuel per voyage, and is designed to carry a variety of products, including diesel, petrol, jet fuel, and increasingly biofuels. As her name suggests, the Ton Renew is part of a new generation of more environmentally efficient vessels, with improved hull design, lower emission engines, and the flexibility to handle cleaner and renewable fuel products as the industry continues to evolve. So while she might not be the biggest vessel you'll see offshore, ships like the Ton Renew are absolutely vitally important to our economy. They're quietly and efficiently keeping the energy supply chain moving around our coasts. And no doubt she'll become a very familiar sight in Irish waters in the months and years ahead. Interesting, another vessel from the same fleet made the headlines recently, and that was the Ton Gemini, which was anchored off Galway, awaiting clearance to berth and discharge her cargo during the recent fuel protests and disruption. And it's vessels like Ton Gemini and others such as the Ton Genius that represent the older generation of tankers, which these new R-class ships like the Ton Renew will eventually replace. It's often only when situations like that arise in shipping that it really comes to the public spotlight. And the reality is that these vessels are working quietly in the background every day, keeping fuel and essential supplies moving around the island. For example, the ton ships would serve Belfast, Derry, Dublin, Whitegate, Galway, and a wide range of ports around Ireland, importing all the different products that are used on an everyday basis in Ireland. So the Ton Renew is the first of the R-class vessels that are heading our way, and I am reliably informed that another one is soon to follow, and the new build program is very strong there with the Erik Ton Group. So keep an eye out for that one along our shores and indeed on your various vessel traffic apps and websites. Now we look at the National Geographic Endurance, and staying with shipping movements, a rather unexpected and impressive visitor to our shores. The National Geographic Endurance recently paid an unexpected visit to Belfast Lough following an itinerary change, and she's a ship you wouldn't normally expect to see in these waters, and certainly one that turned a few heads on her arrival. Now, this is no ordinary cruise ship. The National Geographic Endurance is a state of the art expedition vessel, purpose built for operations in some of the most remote and extreme environments on Earth, particularly the polar regions. Named after Sir Ernest Shackleton's famous ship the Endurance, she is designed to operate in Arctic and Antarctic conditions with a high ice class rating that allows her to safely navigate through sea ice where most vessels simply couldn't go. She carries a relatively small number of passengers compared to our traditional cruise ships, focusing instead on expedition travel, bringing people to some of the most untouched parts of the world with onboard experts, scientists, and naturalists, enhancing the experience. In terms of capability, she's equipped with advanced navigation systems, Zodiac landing craft for shore excursions, and even kayaking exploration equipment, allowing passengers to truly engage with the environments they're visiting. So to see a vessel like this in Belfast Lough is quite something. A ship built for the ice and the extremes, making a rare appearance in much calmer and perhaps more familiar waters to us. And it just goes to show that the variety of vessels that can turn up around our coasts, from working tankers to world class expedition ships, you never quite know what might appear next. And particularly with geopolitics and world situations and freight patterns moving all the time recently, we are certainly seeing a wider variety of vessels in and around our shores. So great for us maritime enthusiasts, I suppose, to see something different popping up along the way. I had a look on marine traffic, and the Endurance has now made her way further north and is in Scotland at the moment. And I expect she'll be heading further north on one of her expeditions very shortly. Now, the word mehel is an old Irish term that describes how people come together to help one another out, and it would have been used in farming circles and fishing circles many moons ago to help people get the harvest in and get a particular job done. But I'd like to mention a fantastic initiative that's helping to keep maritime culture alive here in Ireland, and that's the work of Mehel Mara. Based in Cork City on the River Lee, Mehel Mara has been operating since 1993 as a community boatyard, training centre, and maritime organisation dedicated to promoting traditional boat building skills and social inclusion. The name itself, as I've described, translates roughly into workers of the sea. And that really sums up what they're all about, bringing people together through the maritime activity, whether that's boat building, rowing, sailing, or learning traditional skills like currach building. Now, one of their standout initiatives is the Bádóireacht program, which has been running for over 2 decades and gives young people the opportunity to get out on the water, learn new skills, and build confidence through teamwork and outdoor activity. More recently, they've launched a Pathways program, creating a clear route for young people from their very first experience on the water right through to long term involvement and even potential careers in the maritime sector. But it's not just for young people. Mehel Mara also provides training and opportunity for adults, including boat building, woodwork, and seamanship, all while fostering a strong sense of community and connection to Ireland's maritime heritage. It's a brilliant example, really, of how maritime tradition isn't something we look back on. It's something that's very much alive, evolving, and being passed on to the next generation. So, if you'd like to learn more or get involved, you can find them online at mehelmara.ie or check out their Facebook page by searching Mehel Mara, and it's well worth a look. And I really like to promote these types of groups, and Mehel Mara and Sail Training Ireland and all of those different organisations give us great hope, I suppose, that there is still a really strong current maritime body of work going on out there around our coast, and young people and adults alike are coming together to keep our heritage going. And boat building skills is something that is a must really in our maritime heritage survival. And the fact that those groups are passing those skills on and teaching young people and adults how to do them is really heartwarming and really encouraging, I suppose, from a maritime point of view. And it gives us all hope that the people on the ground are still working away and coming up with different projects, projects like the Reaper revival that we spoke about recently, and all of those things going on around our coast is really, really encouraging. And I think since we've started doing the podcast, we've seen ourselves how many different groups are around the country and who are putting in such great time and dedication into our maritime heritage. And it certainly is alive and well around our coast. And well done to all the groups that are putting in that fantastic work. Now, I mentioned Sail Training Ireland there, and back in episode 15, of course, we were joined by Dara Sheridan, CEO of Sail Training Ireland. And the guys have been in touch there and announced that there are still a limited number of adult places available on upcoming voyage this May aboard the TS Maybe. So that's the sail training vessel Maybe. This is a 4-day sail training voyage running from the 25th to the 28th of May, departing from and returning to Dunleary with a visit to a UK port along the way. The voyage is open to anyone aged 18 or over, and importantly, there's no upper age limit. So it really is an opportunity for anyone with an interest in the sea to get involved. The cost of the trip is €700, which includes your accommodation on board and all meals. And of course, participants will get a real hands-on experience of life at sea, working alongside the crew and learning the ropes aboard this beautiful traditional sailing vessel. Now, opportunities like this don't come around very often, and this could well be your only chance this year to experience a voyage on the Maybe. So if it's something you've ever thought about, now might be the time to take that step and give it a go. So there's a link on the Sail Training Ireland Facebook page, and of course you can also check out the website. So a really good opportunity there again to get out on the water, and something like the Maybe would be a really fantastic experience. And to be fair, that's not a huge amount of money either for what's on offer, and I think lifetime memories will certainly be made. To finish off our news for this episode, a quick local maritime business shout out, and we want to wish the very best of luck to the Salty Sea Safari crew with the launch of their brand new vessel, the Salty Explorer. Now, she's described as a brand new build, ready to take passengers further, smoother, and closer to the magic of the Salty Islands, an area, of course, renowned for its stunning scenery, wildlife, and seabird colonies. It's fantastic to see continued investment in local maritime tourism, and vessels like this play such an important role in connecting people with our coastline and natural heritage. So best of luck to Sam and all the crew at Salty Sea Safari with their new edition, and no doubt the Salty Explorer will be a big hit for the season ahead. And as I mentioned previously, there has been strong hints towards trips out towards Tusker Rock with Salty Sea Safari, and I'm due to speak to Sam shortly for the podcast, so we'll get an update on that one shortly. But hopefully we'll see the Salty Sea Explorer get some fine weather now to begin their expeditions out around the Salty Islands and maybe a little further afield. Now, for this segment, we're going to take a look back at some well-known and not so well-known wrecks, I suppose, in the maritime world. And we're going to begin with a moment of remembrance, as this week marks the anniversary of the loss of the RMS Titanic. In the early hours of April 15th, 1912, the great liner sank in the North Atlantic following her collision, of course, with an iceberg, resulting in the loss of more than 1,500 lives in what remains one of the most well-known maritime disasters in history. But more than a century on, the story of the Titanic is not just one of tragedy. It's also one of lasting change, and the lessons learned from that night continue to shape maritime safety today. Advances in technology, stricter international regulations, and the ongoing work of organisations like Coast Guard services and maritime authorities all play a role in ensuring safer seas for everyone. There were also important design lessons. While Titanic was fitted with watertight compartments, they were not high enough to prevent water spilling from one to another in a major incident. In the years that followed, ship design evolved with taller bulkheads, improved pumping systems, and far more effective compartmentalization, now standard, of course, across modern vessels. Communications too were transformed. Although Titanic carried pioneering wireless telegraphy equipment, it was not monitored around the clock. Now, that led to delays in distress signals being fully acted upon. In response, regulations were introduced requiring a continuous 24-hour radio watch, something that remains a cornerstone of maritime safety to this day. Perhaps most significantly, the tragedy led to the introduction of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, or SOLAS as us in the industry remember it, which made mandatory for ships to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board, alongside a wide range of other safety measures that continue to evolve even now. So while we remember the lives lost, we also recognise how the maritime industry continues to learn, adapt, and innovate. Every regulation, every design, improvement, and every safety system in place today is part of that legacy. And it's a powerful reminder that even in the face of tragedy, progress can emerge, helping to build a safer future for all those who go to sea. And as we remember the victims of those who were lost way back in 1912, of course, we remember and pay tribute to the advances in technology and safety that have happened since that awful night, and may they rest in peace. Now, a remarkable story from our own coastline, one that begins with a shipwreck but ends with something far more enduring. The Neptune of Boston was en route from New Orleans to Liverpool, heavily laden with over 4,000 bales of cotton. She was under the command of Captain Bartlett and carried a crew of 24 hands. But as she made her way along the south coast of Wexford in April of 1860, the weather began to turn. Strong southwesterly winds set in, accompanied by misty rain and increasingly dense fog. Visibility reduced, conditions worsened, and before long, the Neptune found herself driven ashore on the Burrow of Ballyteigue, about a mile west of Kilmore Quay village. Although the wind itself was moderate, the seas were breaking heavily on the strand, and the situation quickly became precarious. In an effort to stabilise the vessel and ease the strain, the decision was made to cut away the masts, a dramatic but necessary move in the circumstances. Thankfully, there was no life. Thankfully, there was no loss of life. Local agent Mr. Edward Meadows of Ballyteigue Castle was first on the scene and took charge of the situation, ensuring the crew were cared for and accounted for. He remained on the Burrow until further assistance arrived, including Francis Harper, the Lloyd's agent in Wexford, along with the American consul, would you believe. In the aftermath, attention turned to salvage. Parts of Neptune's hull and fittings were later offered for sale, with an auction held on August 16, 1860 by Walsh and Sons. Among the items listed were timbers, spars, ironwork, and notably two large wooden deck structures. And it's here that the story takes a fascinating turn. Those deck structures, each measuring approximately 20 feet by 15 feet, were salvaged from the wreck. One of them was purchased by a local man, Mr. Furlong, who owned a licensed premises in Kilmore Quay. Given the remote location of the wreck, surrounded by sandhills, transporting such a large structure was no small task. It had to be physically carried all the way back to the village. Once there, it was attached to the eastern end of Furlong's premises. Over time, that salvaged piece of a ship became something entirely new. The building became known as the Wooden House and went on to serve the community as a restaurant and pub for many years, passing through a number of owners, becoming a well-known local landmark, and it still exists today. So while the Neptune herself was lost to the sands of Ballyteigue, part of her story lived on, not beneath the waves, but in the heart of Kilmore Quay village. It's a powerful reminder that even in a shipwreck, there can be survival and even legacy. And the advert in the newspaper in 1860 read, "Important and valuable wreck sale, to be sold by auction on Thursday the 23rd. On the Burrow of Ballyteigue, part of the hull of the cargo ship Neptune, carefully broken up, consisting of pitch pine and oak, deck and bilge plank, beams, stanchions, the foremost bowsprit, jib, boom, topmasts, yards, two large wooden houses, 20 feet in length and 15 in breadth, two superior large patent windlasses in complete order. Also, iron spikes and about 8 tons of iron bolts. Terms were cash, and the sale was commenced at 12 o'clock by Walsh and Son auctioneers in Wexford on the 16th of August 1860. I think that's fascinating. Like when we look back at and we talk about the circular economy that is often mentioned these days in a bid to reduce costs and to reduce, reuse, and recycle. And way back in 1860, when a vessel ran ashore and there was no hope left for her, there was a sale and they sold off the bits and pieces from her. And eventually, those large wooden structures became the wooden house as we know it today. And anyone who has visited Kilmore Quay will know it there on the hill as you head down to the pier on the right hand side. And I think it's fascinating to look back so far and see how much foresight they had for that auction way back on the 16th of August 1860. And of course, cash was king and probably still is today. And we've another story coming up here on Steady as She Goes very soon, and with the use of salvage materials relating to the vessel, the Alfred D. Snow. And we'll have much more on that story coming up very soon here on the podcast. Now, on the same day as the Neptune was stranded on Ballyteigue Burrow, word came through to Francis Harper, who was the Lloyd's agent in Wexford, that another United States ship, the Vanguard of New York, a vessel of 1,460 tons register, had found herself in serious difficulty on the Blackwater Bank, a little bit further up the Wexford coast. She had departed Liverpool, outbound and fully laden with a general cargo, when she ran aground on the Wexford coast. In an era before modern communications, getting word ashore was no easy task. Fortunately, 2 Arklow fishermen who were nearby the stranded vessel were enlisted by Captain J.P. Norton to carry a message for their help. Now, the men brought their boat ashore at Arklow beach and then ran to Wexford town to raise the alarm, a reminder of just how reliant ships once were on the courage and resourcefulness of those along the coast. Help soon came in the form of the steam tug Erin, which was owned by Richard Devericks of Paul Quay and under the command of Captain Blake. She proceeded immediately to the grounded vessel and began efforts to refloat her. Captain Blake managed to pull the Vanguard's head around into a more favourable position, but despite his best efforts, she could not be fully freed. Recognising that more power would be needed, Captain Norton authorised the hiring of a stronger vessel. So Captain Blake returned to Wexford Port, where the steamer Firefly, under the command of George Thomas and belonging to the Bristol General Steam Navigation Company, was secured for the task. At the same time, 40 labouring men were organised to begin discharging part of the cargo, a necessary step to lighten the ship and give her a better chance of coming free. The following day, operations resumed. The tug Erin returned to the scene with the labourers, and cargo discharge began in earnest. Then, with the arrival of the Firefly, the combined power of both vessels was brought to bear on the stranded ship. And this time it worked. With careful coordination and no small amount of effort, the Vanguard was successfully refloated, a significant achievement given the conditions and limitations of the time. Now, following her recovery, the Firefly was engaged to tow the Vanguard to Kingston, now Cove, from where arrangements were made to bring her back across to Liverpool. As with many such salvage operations, the aftermath also played out in claims and compensation. The owners of the tug Erin sought payment for their 2 days of work assisting the stranded vessel and eventually settled for the sum of £300. The claim involving the Firefly, however, proved more complex and had to be resolved through the Admiralty Court. And it's a story that highlights not only the dangers of navigation along our coast, but also the determination, skill, and cooperation that often defined maritime rescue efforts in the 19th century. Long before systems and technologies that we rely on today were in existence. And there's a couple of things, I suppose, that pop up from that story and both stories. The one from that story is that the two fishermen, they went ashore in the boat and they ran all the way to Wexford from Arklow to deliver the word that assistance was needed. And when I was researching and looking at this story, I was wondering, were they part of the group that discharged the vessel, ultimately described as the labouring men? Because I'd like to think they earned a few pound out of it, because there probably wasn't a whole lot of fishing going on with this salvage operation in flow. And the other point, I suppose, to look is that here were two major incidents on the same day, way back on the 30th of April 1860. And when we think of a maritime disaster today, it's big news, it's huge news. Of course it is. It's a hugely significant event. But when we look back through the history books and through our research, there are many, many occasions, maybe not in the months of April and May and June, but certainly throughout the winter period, where there were multiple wrecks along our coasts. And, there was a Lloyd's agent in Wexford and the American consul were around. So, it just again copper fastens how important and how well respected the maritime trade was around our coasts. And I think if we had two similar scale disasters on our coast at the moment, would we even have the resources to be able to deal with it? They certainly did back in 1860. And two very interesting stories, I thought, to bring to you, the listeners there, and how they were dealt with. And all was not lost, even though the vessels themselves were in severe difficulty in both cases. Now, staying with our theme of maritime remembrance for this episode, um, it also marks, this time of year also marks the anniversaries of two lesser known but no less important losses from 1917. And on the 13th of April 1917, the SS Bandon was lost at sea during one of the most dangerous periods of the First World War, when merchant shipping faced constant threat from mines and submarines. Just a day later, on the 14th of April 1917, the SS Hermine was seriously damaged after striking a mine off the Waterford coast, a stark reminder of how close to home those wartime dangers really were. Now, these incidents form part of a much wider story of Irish coastal waters during the Great War, where countless vessels, cargo ships, steamers, and fishing boats alike found themselves on the front line of a global conflict. Now, if you'd like to learn more about these two incidents in particular and their stories, the team at Tides and Tales with Andrew and the team have some excellent coverage over on their Facebook page and their website. So I'd encourage you to go and check that out. And it's important that we continue to remember not just the headline events, but also these quieter stories that form such a vital part of our maritime heritage. And now it's time for our maritime words of the week. And this one is a phrase that you'll often hear when the temperature really drops during the winter months, and it's to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. Now, I've consulted in detail with our resident maritime historian here at the Roster Harbour Maritime Heritage Centre, the great Brian Clear himself, and there's a long standing and very popular nautical explanation behind this phrase. The story goes that on old warships, cannonballs were stacked in pyramids on a brass plate known as a monkey. All good so far. In extremely cold weather, the brass would contract, causing the plate to warp, and the cannonballs would fall off. Now, it's a brilliant story and one that sounds perfectly at home in maritime history. But perhaps the reality is a little different. According to research, there's no solid evidence that the cannonballs were ever stored this way on ships. In fact, it would have been a little bit impractical with loose cannonballs on a rolling deck, which would have been quite dangerous. They were typically stored securely in wooden racks designed to keep them in place, even in rough seas. Historians and linguists generally agree that the phrase likely came much later as a colourful way of describing extreme cold, rather than from any genuine naval practice. So while it might sound wonderfully nautical to freeze the balls off a brass monkey, it almost certainly is a myth, one of those stories that has taken on a life of its own over time. But what do you think? Have you heard a different version of the story, or do you have any evidence that might support the nautical origins of the phrase? And we'd love to hear from you in that regard. Now, I can't find anything that says it doesn't, there's any other explanation outside of the nautical world. So if it didn't actually happen as I've described, I would say that seafarers certainly came up with the phrase, and potentially maybe came up with the evidence afterwards. But I'd like to hear what the listeners have to say, and as if there's any more evidence for or against the argument of freezing the balls off a brass monkey. I think it's a great phrase anyway, and in the nautical world, I think we should claim it as one of our own. And that just about brings us to the end of episode 17 of Steady as She Goes. So from the shores of Ballyteigue in 1860 to the modern vessels sailing our waters today, it's clear that the sea continues to shape our stories, our communities, and our lives. We've remembered those who we've lost, we've celebrated new beginnings, and shared just a few of the many stories that connect us all to the maritime world. If there is any stories that you'd like us to share here on the podcast, please do send them in to us. If there's anyone that you think we should talk to, please suggest them and have a word with them. Get them to give us a shout. And we'll keep the maritime stories flowing here on Steady as She Goes. It's a really enjoyable experience. It's hard to believe that we're 17 episodes in now. As I said before, the support that we've had so far means everything to us, and it really helps us keep the stories alive and is encouraging us to dig deeper and find out more. We've lots more guests lined up for you in the coming weeks and months. So if you've enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to like, follow, share the podcast. Check out our Facebook page, our TikTok page, and of course, tell as many people as you can. You can get in touch with us, of course, through the social media or on the email address, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, your own stories, and your own connections to the sea. However deep or shallow they may be, we'd be delighted to hear from you. And of course, we'd be delighted to see you down at the Roster Harbour Maritime Heritage Centre. Of course, we are open from 12 to 4 every Saturday. We're going to be getting out and about on a few visits now throughout the summer months, so you might catch us at one of the other various maritime museums, centres, or places of interest around the country. But please do pop down and see us. Tea and tabnabs are always available, as I've said before, 12 to 4 every Saturday, and admission, of course, is completely free. Keep sharing the stories. Keep liking the pictures and the posts. Fair winds, safe sailing, and as always, steady as she goes.